So let's talk a little bit about, the modern political tenor. There are a lot of people who complain right now that morality and politics seem to be completely foreign to one another, and I have a lot of sympathies toward that position. Not in terms of the positions being espoused, because obviously you and I think, agree on 99.9% of all things political, but with regard to sort of the way that politics is being carried on, whether it's people accosting each other in restaurants and screaming at them, or whether it is some of the president's tweets. There's a feeling that morality has sort of gone by the wayside. How much of biblical values and morality is character, and how much of it is public policy when it comes to politics? Because this was a big argument, obviously, in 2016. It'll be a big argument again, I assume.
This is going to blow. All right, so this will blow your mind. I raised my boys to believe that character was more important than anything. I'm one of the few Jewish parents who didn't give a damn about my kids' grades. I mean, didn't give a damn. I couldn't care less. All I wanted was good kids. Because I really do believe character uber alles, that character ultimately will determine their lives. And whether they go to this college or that college or no college is secondary to their character. And having said that, I don't really care about Donald Trump's sins. So it sounds like a contradiction. This is the most important value I taught to my kids. And then the president of the United States, I'm saying it's secondary. But I live with that. I live with that conjunction. And ironically, part of it is that I got a lot of my wisdom, if I have any, from the Bible. God uses King David, who makes, Donald Trump look saintly. I mean, Donald Trump didn't have any husband killed so he could sleep with the wife. Let's be honest. King David did. And then God chooses, who does God choose of all the Canaanites? Who does God choose to be the one to help the Israelites get into Canaan? A prostitute. It's almost the Bible's and God's way of saying, listen, I could take these sexual sinners and I could use them for good. And I emphasize the word sexual sin because I think that a lot of religious people place too much emphasis on sexual sin beyond all the other areas of life. I think that's a problematic issue worthy another hour one day, but it's a big deal. Anyway, I care more about America than I care about the character of a president.
Okay, so let me give you the counter argument. So the counter argument is not that the policy that the president espouses doesn't matter, because obviously I'm very happy with a lot of President Trump's policies. I think the country is winning because of a lot of President Trump's policies. But there are externalities to public character, meaning that you're right. I don't care all that much about Donald Trump's peccadillos in the past because whatever, it doesn't affect the public discourse, I think, in any serious way. But when the president says things that are vile about people publicly, or when the president says that, if people come to his protests and they make trouble, punch them in the face or whatever it is. When this sort of stuff happens, it from a character perspective, not only does it have create a problem, I think, for the country, it also creates a problem for a lot of Christians who are tempted to start saying King David instead of just being Nathan, saying like, right, that's wrong. You're not allowed to do that. Like it's tempting to play God in the King David story and say, right, he's King David, as opposed to, well, God gets to pick who King David is. It's our job to say, right, you're not allowed to take that guy's husband and that woman's husband and send him out to the battlefield to get killed so that he can repent, right? So I think that what's happened, one of the things that I think is driving apart the country is it's not a referendum on the president so much as it's a referendum on evangelical Christians and religious Jews and people who are overlooking, at least publicly, some of the president's sins in order to maintain a level of I think, emotional support. Because I think you can intellectually support what the president does on policy and still say, right, but he's acting like a schmuck right here. And it's that gap that I think is really driving away young people, particularly with regard to President Trump. At least
I don't want them to be driven away. This is when you said we agree on 99.9%. This might be the point one where we have a difference. I admire the religious community for sticking with Donald Trump. I have defended them in writing a great deal, whether it's religious Christians or Jews, because they understand what's at play here. The fate of the United States of America, the last best hope of humanity, is at risk here.
I'm not saying they shouldn't vote for him, mind you. I'm not saying they shouldn't even support him politically.
So fine. So look,
But when he sins, should they
yes,
say that is bad what he just did?
Yes, that's fine. But many do, but they try to keep a perspective. And this is where I know I am knocked for saying this. I believe there's a civil war in the United States. There is no joy in my saying this. I've said this for years now. I pray that it remains nonviolent. I don't know if it will. I think there's a lot of people on the left who, if they could get away with it, would physically hurt people on the right, and more so than the other way around. As Alan Dershowitz, Hillary Clinton supporter, lifelong Democrat, lifelong liberal, said to me, and it's on video, in his apartment in Manhattan last year. He said, let me tell you something, as a Jew, as an American, as a liberal, I don't fear a handful of Nazis. They mean nothing. I fear the far left. And that's how I feel. And the far left is Nazis are not taking over the Republican Party. That's an absurdity. It's a libel. It's stupid. But the far left is taking over the Democratic Party. So there's a civil war, and I am not going to spend my time criticizing the only guy who has saved me from losing the country. Because had there been any other Republican, and by the way, I was against him. And it's all in print. I was against him during the entire primary. But I said from my first article, if he wins the nomination, I'll support him. Because there's no choice. But there is such a war at stake right now. Nobody else would have defeated Hillary Clinton. He was the only one, I believe. I don't think Ted Cruz would have. I don't think Marco Rubio would have. I don't believe Jeb Bush would have. And that was the brink. Supreme Court-wise, values-wise, you name it. That was the brink for this country. So in light of that, a moronic tweet or an awful statement is very small compared to the bigger issue.
I guess the question is, why does that always have to be contextualized? Meaning, I can agree with virtually everything that you just said there.
Right.
But the question that I have is that the next election, the biggest single voting bloc is going to be millennials. It's going to be younger people. And those people actually take his tweets seriously. They actually, when he does something when he says something they find vile, that actually matters to them, even more so than the policy in many cases. And what matters even more than that is I think, so many people on the right who seem to refuse to acknowledge, I just don't see why you can't do both. I don't see why you can't say, his policies are great, I'm thrilled with his policies, and I wish he would stop doing that. Or it would be better if he would stop doing that. Or what he just said was garbage and be better off as a country if he hadn't done that. But that doesn't mean I'm going to turn over the country to this bunch of nut jobs on the left.
But you've just contextualized it, and that's great. If you put that in that concept, hey, listen, I can't stand what he just said, but frankly, the policies are saving the country. No, there isn't anybody who supports him who would differ with you.
Right. The only problem is that by saying, but what the point of the contextualization, I'm making the contextualization to you and to the audience, I can make clear the position.
Right.
The problem is that if, let's say, he says something about Charlottesville, and it's something that I find distasteful.
We may have a difference of understanding, and I have perused this a tremendous number of times. He didn't say they were good Nazis and
he said there were good people on both sides on the Friday night. On the Friday night.
Wasn't that about statues?
The Friday night was a white supremacist
Okay, do you think he was saying that there were good Nazis? Do you believe he believes
I think he was saying there were
Nazis?
good people who were marching, not good Nazis. I think what he was saying is that there were good people who were marching with the Nazis.
So here's my Talmudic proof that he didn't say that.
Okay.
Because he doesn't believe there's good Antifa.
No, but I think the easy way for him to say things is there's good people on both sides.
Right, but he doesn't believe there's any good Antifa.
I'm not sure that he thinks things through to the extent necessary to actually.
Okay, whether he does or doesn't.
The point is not Charlottesville, and I'm happy to argue Charlottesville. Okay. And we can go back through the text, and we'll bring out our Talmuds, and we can actually look through the legislative history of what he said. But anything that he said that people find distasteful, particularly, or that you would find distasteful in any other context, why can't we just say, that's distasteful? So here's a good example. He just went and he met with Kim Jong-un. He was extraordinarily warm toward Kim Jong-un. He said really nice things about a guy who is a dictator of 25 million people or so.
He's a butcher.
He's a butcher.
The guy's a butcher.
One of the worst people on planet Earth.
Right.
And the president of the United States said he's a strong guy.
Right.
Only 1 in 10,000 people could do this sort of thing.
Right.
And as somebody who studied the former Soviet Union, I'm sure you look at this and you go, well, hold up just a second here.
Right.
So why can't we just say that? And then when it comes time for 2020, say, Right, and the overall opinion is, I'll vote for him anyway because that's that. But not every day is a referendum on the election. This, I guess, is my main point of criticism, because you and I are probably going to vote the same way in 2020, right? The chances are very good that I vote for President Trump in 2020.
Or this year.
Right, well, in 2018, we'll certainly vote the same way. I'm going to vote Republican in 2018.
Yes.
In 2020, there's a very high likelihood I'll vote for President Trump, barring some sort of cataclysmic event.
Right, okay.
All of that said, I do think that there is something deeply important about conservatives pointing out when he does something wrong, because otherwise we lose our intellectual credibility and look as though it is our job to become his lawyers, as opposed to being advocates for a position for which he is the best.
I understand that, and it makes sense. You and I both speak a great deal to young people. I through PragerU, and you through, of course, the Daily Wire and all of your podcasts and all of the things you do. I have a big following. You have a big following. I don't think they're thinking, gee, this Prager who talks about morality, he doesn't have that much credibility with me because he supports the president. Because people understand why I do, and I try to make it clear why I do. So your worry is not my worry, but we need you. And this is not the last person I would patronize of the 6 billion people on Earth, or 7 billion. So I'm not patronizing you. We need you terribly. Remember, though, that there are people on our side who don't. There is one, I don't want to say his name because I know him pretty well. And it'll be obvious if anybody wants to research it, but most people won't. Who said that who's a lifelong Republican and said Trump is worse than Stalin.
That's idiotic.
Okay, it is. It's idiotic, and it's very destructive. And there are those who they've left the party. George Will, I adore George Will. He's done Prager University videos, and he's left the Republican Party. This is overwrought reaction. The world is dirty. And I wish we had Donald Trump with tremendous style and all the wonderful things you would like, but we have him. It's sort of like a marriage. He's a package. Trump is a package. This package saved this country from the left taking it over in the last election. That is so big that I somehow never lose picture of that with the sins that he commits. That's my position. Your position is, for our credibility, let's point out each of the sins that he commits. Fine. We need you and we need me. And I mean this quite sincerely. And yours is as morality-based as mine is morality-based. But I am so focused on the near death of America that took place in 2016. And I believe that. I believe had Hillary Clinton or any Democrat, Joe Biden, it's irrelevant. Had any Democrat won then, I had no reason to have faith that this country will not go the way of Western Europe.